Why is it that some people with only ordinary abilities rise to the top, while others blessed with remarkable talent never seem to make it? Why does the straight A student, armed with degrees and certificates, keep stumbling from job to job, while someone with no formal education quietly becomes a master of their craft? Chances are you've asked yourself this question before. You watch people who appear smarter, more gifted, more naturally capable, and a voice inside whispers, I don't stand a chance against them. But what if that voice is wrong? What if talent, something we obsess over and glorify, is not the golden ticket we think it is? What if success has very little to do with how impressive you are at the beginning, and everything to do with how consistently you commit, persist, and push forward when no one is watching? Today's story takes place in a single kitchen, shared by two individuals. One walked in with advantages, confidence, and credentials. The other arrived with nothing but determination and grit. They started in the same place, faced the same challenges, and yet only one of them truly succeeded. Stay with me until the very end, because this story might completely transform the way you measure your own potential and how you see yourself from this moment on. In the center of a city that never slowed down stood a restaurant known for its prestige and pressure, Grand Mason. It was celebrated for its refined French cuisine and feared for its unforgiving standards. Um, at the helm of its kitchen was Chef Laurent, a man respected for two qualities above all else: relentless perfectionism and an uncanny ability to recognize true potential. On one quiet Monday morning, two new faces stepped into his kitchen. The first was Alex Chen, 25 years old, a culinary prodigy on paper. A top graduate from an elite culinary academy, Alex had trained under famous chefs, spent months refining his craft in Paris, and moved with the effortless confidence of someone who had always been praised. His knife work was sharp, his posture upright, his presence commanding. As he slipped into his spotless chef's coat, he smirked slightly and said to the line cooks nearby, I trained under Lord Blur. Straightening his sleeves, he added, this place shouldn't be too challenging. The second newcomer was David Martinez, just 23. He had no diploma, no prestigious mentors, and no formal culinary education. Culinary school had been a dream he simply couldn't afford. Instead, David had spent 3 long years scrubbing plates in a small roadside diner, learning by watching, listening, and teaching himself through late-night YouTube videos after exhausting shifts. When David entered the Grand Mason kitchen, his hands shook. His chef's coat was borrowed and hung awkwardly on his thin frame. He didn't recognize many of the French terms tossed around casually by the other chefs. Compared to Alex, he seemed invisible. But David carried something no certificate could prove: an unteachable hunger to improve. From the very first week, the contrast between the two was impossible to ignore. Alex arrived precisely on time, never early, never late. He executed his duties with clean technique and mechanical accuracy, but only what was required. When a fellow cook fell behind and asked for help, Alex would glance at the clock and respond coolly, that's not my station. He trusted his talent. In his mind, it was already enough. David, on the other hand, showed up 30 minutes before anyone else. He observed silently, asked questions when appropriate, and stayed late to clean areas no one inspected. When someone struggled, David finished his own tasks first, then quietly stepped in to assist, never seeking credit. Chef Laurent noticed everything. He said nothing. At night, David lay awake, doubt twisting in his chest. Do I really belong here? Everyone else studied this. They speak a language I barely understand. What if I'm not good enough? Yet every morning, despite the fear, he returned. 6 weeks passed. The kitchen found its rhythm. Alex remained efficient but distant. David remained inexperienced but relentlessly eager. Then, one Friday morning during prep, Chef Laurent gathered the staff and spoke words that sent a shock through the room. In 3 months, he said calmly, I will be opening a second restaurant. I need a sous chef, someone who will help me build a kitchen from the ground up. I've been watching you all closely. He paused. Two of you have stood out, Alex and David. The room fell silent. For the next month, Chef Laurent continued, you will each lead different sections. You will manage pressure services, design new dishes, and make real decisions. At the end of this trial, one of you will become my sous chef. He stopped for a moment, letting the tension settle. The other, he said quietly, will remain exactly where you are now. And with that, the real test began. Alex allowed himself a quiet smile. This isn't even a contest, he thought. I have the education, the awards, the precision. David is kind, but he's not a real chef. After the meeting, Alex confidently approached Chef Laurent. Chef, I'm grateful for the opportunity, he said, voice calm but assured. But do we really need a trial? My background already proves what I can do. Chef Laurent studied him for a moment, his face unreadable. Then the coming month, he replied evenly, should pose no challenge for you at all. Across the kitchen, David felt his chest tighten. Doubt crept in like a familiar shadow. You don't belong here, it whispered. He's faster, smarter, trained. You're pretending. For a moment, fear nearly won. Then David remembered the real reason he fell in love with cooking. Not recognition, not titles, but the quiet joy of watching someone smile after the first bite of a meal he created. He inhaled deeply. I may never be the most gifted, he told himself, but I can outwork anyone in this room. The first week of the trial revealed everything. Alex executed every task with surgical precision. His knife work was flawless, his timing perfect, no mistakes, no surprises. But when a young line cook panicked during a rush and burst into tears after a small error, Alex scoffed under his breath. Unbelievable, he muttered. Amateurs. David's technique, by contrast, was less refined, but his presence was steady. Later that week, when the same cook froze again under pressure, David stepped in quietly. Hey, he said calmly, placing a reassuring hand on the counter. It's all right. Watch me. We'll fix this together. Then came Saturday night. Every table was filled. 3 private events ran simultaneously. A respected food critic was rumored to be dining anonymously. Tension hung in the air like smoke. Halfway through service, disaster struck. The main oven failed. Orders backed up instantly. Stress rippled through the kitchen. Panic threatened to take over. Chef Laurent stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. Chaos. We adapt. We improvise, he said firmly. Who has a solution? And in that moment, talent alone would no longer be enough. Alex stood frozen, his mind racing. This wasn't in the manual. There was no procedure for this. How am I supposed to cook without the right equipment? He thought. This isn't my mistake. This isn't my responsibility. Before he could say another word, David stepped forward. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice did not. Chef, David said, swallowing hard. I spent 3 years working in a diner where half the equipment barely functioned. I can rework the dishes. We can use the stovetop and the salamander. It won't be flawless, but we can finish service. For a brief moment, the kitchen hesitated. Then Chef Laurent nodded, and David moved. For the next 3 hours, he worked harder than he ever had in his life. His palms burned. His shoulders screamed with pain. Sweat soaked through his coat and blurred his vision. But he didn't slow down. He bounced between stations, rewrote plating on the fly, adjusted temperatures, calmed panicking cooks, and kept the team focused when fear threatened to tear everything apart. Stay with me, he kept saying. We've got this. Alex, meanwhile, stayed at his station. He completed the tasks assigned to him. Nothing less, nothing more. His jaw tightened as he muttered complaints about standards, protocols, and conditions that no professional kitchen should tolerate. When the final plate left the pass, the staff collapsed where they stood. They had survived the night. Chef Laurent stood silently in the center of the kitchen, eyes moving slowly from one exhausted face to another. He said nothing, but his silence spoke louder than words. The next morning was Sunday. The restaurant was closed. Chef Laurent asked Alex and David to come in early. They stood alone in the empty kitchen, fatigue clinging to them like a weight. Without speaking, Chef Laurent placed 2 knives on the stainless steel counter. One was stunning, polished, perfectly balanced, gleaming under the lights. The other was old and scarred, its handle cracked and wrapped in tape. Chef Laurent picked up the first knife. Alex, he said calmly, this knife costs $800, forged by a master. Perfect edge, perfect balance. He paused. Do you know what happens if I never use it? If I keep it tucked away because I'm afraid to scratch it or stain it? He set it down gently. It becomes useless. Beautiful, but useless. Then he lifted the second knife. This one cost me $20 from a supply store, he said. I've owned it for 15 years. The handle is broken. The blade has been sharpened so many times it's half its original size. He held it up to the light. But this is my favorite knife. Alex frowned slightly. Because I use it every single day, Chef Laurent continued. I take care of it, I trust it, and it has never failed me. Then Chef Laurent turned to Alex. You are the $800 knife, he said quietly. Impressive training, flawless technique, a beautiful resume. He let the words settle. But you refuse to get dirty. You rely on talent alone. You wait to be served perfect conditions. You don't lift others. You don't push past discomfort. His gaze sharpened. You expect success to come to you without earning it through effort. And in that moment, Alex finally understood. Talent had brought him to the kitchen, but it was effort that decided who truly belonged there. Alex's face flushed, the confidence he once wore so easily now slipping away. Chef Laurent turned to David. And you, he said, lifting the worn knife slightly, are the $20 blade. Rough, unpolished, self-taught, far from perfect. David lowered his eyes. But you show up every single day ready to work, the chef continued. When the kitchen was falling apart, you didn't ask whose responsibility it was. You didn't complain about fairness. You looked for answers. You put people before pride. Chef Laurent let the silence stretch. There's something both of you need to hear, he said slowly. In 30 years of cooking, I've met hundreds of chefs with exceptional talent. He paused. Do you know how many truly made it? Neither spoke. Maybe 1 out of 10. Did, he said quietly. The rest depended on talent alone. When things became uncomfortable, they quit. They believed skill would carry them through, so they never built discipline. They never learned that character matters. He stepped closer. How you show up, how you treat people, how you respond under pressure, those things outweigh raw ability every time. He looked at David. Your skill level may not be the highest in this kitchen today, he said, but you possess what no school can teach: humility, relentless work ethic, and real respect for the craft. Then he turned to Alex. And you may be the most technically gifted here, Chef Laurent said evenly, but skill without character will never build a great kitchen. Talent without teamwork will never create a successful restaurant. He took a breath. You both have 2 weeks left. Alex, he said, if you want this position, show me your more precision and credentials. Show me you can care about something beyond yourself. Then he faced David again. And you, keep doing exactly what you're doing, but start believing you belong here. He met David's eyes. Because you do. That conversation changed both men. That Sunday night, Alex couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, shame settled heavy in his chest. He replayed every moment he had dismissed others, every time he refused to help because it wasn't his responsibility, every instance where he leaned on reputation instead of effort. Monday morning, something was different. Alex arrived early, not exactly on time. Early. He watched David quietly preparing mise en place and hesitated. Then, awkwardly, he asked a question he'd never asked before. Can I help? At first, it felt unnatural. His pride fought back. Old habits don't vanish overnight. But slowly, something shifted. He stayed late. He coached a junior cook through a difficult technique. Instead of criticizing mistakes, he stepped in when someone needed support. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Meanwhile, David began to change too. Chef Laurent's words echoed in his mind, "You belong here." For the first time, he stood a little straighter. He trusted his instincts more. He spoke up when he had ideas. He still worked harder than anyone, but now he believed his effort mattered. 2 weeks remained, and this time the competition wasn't about who was more talented. It was about who had truly grown. Once David stopped doubting himself, everything began to change. Without fear clouding his mind, his technique sharpened at an incredible pace. His movements became more confident, his decisions more decisive. He began offering ideas during prep, thoughtful suggestions, not loud opinions. What grew inside him wasn't arrogance, but a quiet, grounded confidence. Then came the final challenge. Chef Laurent gathered both men and delivered the last test. Create an original dish, he said, one that reflects who you are as a chef and as a person. Alex went first. He presented a dish that was technically breathtaking. Every cut was exact. Every sauce was reduced to perfection. The plating was sharp, modern, and complex, an unmistakable product of elite culinary training. It was impressive. Undeniably so, David followed. His dish was simpler in appearance. It drew inspiration from meals his mother used to cook, comforting flavors elevated with techniques he'd learned in the Grand Mason kitchen. It wasn't flashy, but every component felt intentional. Every bite carried memory, care, and meaning. Chef Laurent tasted both plates, and then he said nothing. The silence stretched. Seconds felt like minutes. Finally, he spoke. Alex, he said, your dish is flawless. Every technique is executed perfectly. Alex allowed himself a small smile. He was certain this was the moment. But, Chef Laurent continued, there's no soul here. I don't taste you. I taste your education. I taste your training. Alex's smile faded. Chef Laurent turned to David's plate. David, your dish is less complex, he said. But I taste passion. I taste memory. I taste someone who cooks because they love it, not because they're trying to impress. That evening, Chef Laurent called the entire kitchen together. I've made my decision regarding the sous chef position, he announced. The room went still. But before I announce it, he said, there's something important I need to recognize. He looked at Alex. In the past 2 weeks, you've grown more than you did in all the time before this competition. I've seen you arrive early. I've seen you help others. I've seen you try, truly try. That matters. Keep going. You have a strong future ahead of you. Alex nodded, humbled, grateful. Then Chef Laurent turned. The position goes to David. David's breath caught. His eyes filled with tears. He couldn't speak. In his mind, he saw himself 3 years earlier, standing over a sink full of dirty plates, wondering if he'd ever get a real chance. He remembered every doubt, every fear, every night he almost quit. Chef Laurent placed a hand on his shoulder. You didn't earn this because you're the most talented, he said quietly. You earned it because you showed me something far rarer than talent. He paused. Consistent excellence in your attitude. Every single day. 6 months later, the second restaurant opened to great success. David led the kitchen with the same humility, discipline, and dedication that had carried him there. The staff trusted him, the culture thrived, and Alex, he stayed at the original Grand Mason. But he wasn't the same chef anymore. He became a mentor to younger cooks, teaching not just technique, but the lesson that changed him forever. Talent opens the door. Character determines how long you stay. The moment David stopped questioning his worth, everything shifted. With self-doubt no longer holding him back, his growth accelerated. His hands moved with purpose. His choices became sharper. During prep, he began sharing ideas, not to stand out, but to contribute. What emerged wasn't ego, but a calm, steady confidence rooted in belief rather than comparison. Then came the final trial. Chef Laurent stood between them and delivered the last instruction. Create a dish of your own, he said, not one meant to impress, but one that represents who you are. Alex stepped forward first. His plate was a showcase of mastery. Every element was calculated, every technique executed with precision. The presentation was modern, complex, and undeniably refined, a clear reflection of years spent in elite kitchens. It was stunning, technically undeniable. Then David presented his dish. It was simpler, almost understated. Inspired by meals he grew up with, it carried familiar flavors, refined using everything he had learned at Grand Mason. It didn't demand attention, but it invited it. Each bite felt intentional, personal, honest. Chef Lauren tasted both and said nothing. The kitchen held its breath. Finally, he broke the silence. Alex, he said, this dish is technically perfect. There isn't a single flaw in execution. Alex felt a surge of relief. This had to be it. But, the chef continued, I don't feel you here. What I taste is training, structure, instruction. Alex's expression changed. Chef Laurent turned to David's plate. This dish is simpler, he said, but I taste care. I taste history. I taste someone who cooks out of love, not ambition. That night, Chef Laurent gathered the entire team. I've made my decision about the sous chef role, he announced. The room went quiet. But before I say the name, he added, there's something that deserves recognition. He looked directly at Alex. In these past 2 weeks, you've grown more than you had in months before. You showed up early, you helped others, you made an effort to change, and that matters. If you continue on this path, your future is strong. Alex nodded, humbled, grateful. Then Chef Laurent turned. The position goes to David. David froze. Emotion welled up in his chest. Words failed him. In his mind, he saw his past, standing at a sink full of dishes, wondering if effort would ever be enough. He remembered the doubt, the exhaustion, the nights he nearly walked away. Chef Laurent placed a steady hand on his shoulder. You didn't earn this by being the most gifted, he said. You earned it by showing something far more rare. He paused. Consistency. Character, the right attitude, every single day. 6 months later, the second restaurant opened and thrived. David led the kitchen with humility, discipline, and quiet strength. The team trusted him. The culture reflected him. And Alex? He remained at the original Grand Mason, but he was no longer the same man. He became a guide to younger cooks, sharing not only technique, but the lesson that reshaped his life. Talent may open the door, but character decides whether you stay.